Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jace, and welcome to another exciting episode of the ELAV8 podcast. Today, Sam and I are diving in deep, covering everything from the global economy. Is it being intentionally crashed? Is it not? What's happening with crypto? Well, you probably should check it out.
I think the stock market's going to crash. All these things are going to crash. Everyone's going to give up in crypto, leave it for dead, and then people are waiting on the sidelines to buy Bitcoin, Solana, Cardano, and Ethereum, and XRP. And those assets afterwards are going to go to the absolute moon when everyone's left it for dead. The weak hands will have given up their stacks, and we're going to transition into a digital economy.
All right, Sam, you're gonna do the intro. You're gonna do the intro. It's gonna be fantastic.
I'm gonna toss you a softball here. It is all happening. My question is, what is actually happening?
Well, what's happening right now is the global world of finance is melting down. And the question is it intentional? Is it not intentional? And we're trying to figure out how much of that is playing into the hands of the globalists versus the statist, and it's just being all fantastic.
Well, I think the first question I think everybody's going to have is a selfish one, which is how do you play this, right? And what's going to work and what's not going to work. And it's clear, like the other shoe is dropping. Shit is hitting the fan. So,
Oh yeah.
How are you viewing it? What is your strategy?
Okay, so I'm gonna be so politically neutral, and I genuinely mean it. This is not about Democrats versus Republicans. It's actually completely changed, right? It's the haves versus the have-nots, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the game has changed. We're beyond January 20th, right? The election's sealed. So now we're trying to decide like who is going to win this trade war because it basically three pillars, right? There's this trade war going on, right? There's the rates that aren't being cut, all right, as well as like which countries are actually winning because we're doing all these tariffs things, right? But what country is not experiencing the pain right now? What what's your thoughts on that?
Which country is not experiencing the pain? This is a great question, actually. I'm stumped. Who's not?
Off right now with Canada as well as Mexico. So there really isn't an unaffected region right now, unless you want to consider something like Australia, right? But to be fair, like they're not one of the global players. No disrespect to our Australian friends, but they're not necessarily a global player that's affecting, global markets at the moment.
Well, I think what we're seeing, right, is everything we all knew it is interconnected, right? But I think everybody somehow thought that they weren't, or maybe thought that other people are more interconnected than they are, or whatever. But if you look
Mhm.
around, I think your point of like everybody has their handout right now, and everybody's looking at their bank account, being like, "I ain't got it, so I don't know what to tell you."
Yeah, everybody's talking about buy the dip, and my response is with what? Like what? We're like, there's no this is what's crazy, right? There's a liquidity crisis everywhere, unless you are the money printer. If you're the money printer, man, it's the greatest time in the world to privatize stocks, and that's what's going to happen. Is like, U.S. government as well as governments globally are going to start purchasing equity stakes in all these global corporations and start bringing it internally to help balance their balance sheet.
Okay, that's one scenario. So you think this is essentially the start of fascism, right? Where the government prints money to fully cement the public-private ownership of essential companies?
Yes and no, because that word right now, let's be fair, right, is like
No.
means so many different things to so many
Here's
different
the
people,
definition.
right?
Let me give you the definition of
Thank
fascism,
you.
right? What
There we
is
go.
it?
That's what I want.
Before we segue, so let me give you, or at least my definition of it, or the definition I've been hearing, right, is the merger of public and private into one,
Correct.
right? There is no public and private. So is this the Hitler version of fascism? I don't know.
Mhm.
That remains to be seen. It's a confusing time around that. We're not going to touch that. However, based on what you just said, which is the government buying stock in corporations with money that it's actively printing, how is that not fascism?
No, it is, right? And I just wanted to make sure our definitions were clear, right? Because a lot of people are going to have an emotional response to that word, right? And once again, that's why I stated at the very beginning, this isn't actually a political stance, right? We're just observing the tea leaves and seeing where the money's flowing. And you sent me a great podcast, and I'm going to bring it full circle. It's about, is this intentional? What is happening in the global markets? And when you sent that to me, right, this crash, if you will, that's happening, my first initial emotional response was like, there's no way. There's no way. And then I listened to it and I 100% fundamentally believe it is intentional. And the reason why I believe it's intentional was very outlined in the podcast you sent me is that right now there's a battle between essentially the Federal Reserve and the United States government. Right, that's actually a fundamentalist, like reductionist view of it. I'm oversimplifying, but that's what's happening. And the U.S. government is basically hoping the Fed blinks to lower rates, right? Because they need money to be cheap. And the reason why they need that to be cheap is we have, I think, $6 trillion. You can correct me, you can fact check me if this is wrong. We have it's either $4 or $6 trillion that's coming. I think actually it's four. It's $4 trillion within 6 months that we have to pay off. And 4.78% interest on, $4 trillion is going to be terrible when it could be something like 3.5%. So right now, Trump and his administration is trying to get, how to blink. So when that debt comes due, it doesn't increase our deficit even more.
Or,
oh, here we go.
And this is the thing that I was just sensing is, did they just look at this situation, realize that it's fundamentally not salvageable, and the only way out is to sacrifice the dollar?
I mean, genuinely, it might be. It might be. And I mean, with our robust audience of like 30 listeners and viewers or whatever, hopefully we reach enough people to understand. Just one would be great to get people to understand what is happening, right? So, Sam, can you explain to our robust audience what the global reserve currency is?
So the global reserve currency is basically what it used to be. There is none at the moment. There is no reserve currency. So this is pieces of paper, right? And we've been living in a piece of paper monopoly. Like the government can print as much money and it has as much value as we assign to that money based on the goods and services that we put forward. It used to be that the reserve currency was gold. It no longer is. So if you now have watched this, and then actually it was tethered to oil. It was the petrodollar, and that's where it's been for, say, the last 40 years or so. We'll just be conservative. I don't know if that's accurate. But for the last little while, it was tied to the petrodollar. It no longer is there. That's dead, right? So we lost that war. So now we have the reserve currency of the world, which is the American dollar. Most every transaction, it's the heavily weighted currency, is now tethered to literally nothing. And the country has escalated into 30-something trillion dollars in debt, and it's adding an additional trillion every quarter. And if you are the largest debtor looking at this and you realize that your currency, which is currently running the world, is backed by nothing, and you're looking at your debt and the way this is mounting, and you're looking at other strategic assets that you can purchase with that reserve currency while it still has value, wouldn't your move then be, I'm going to buy up all the gold, all the Bitcoin, all of the scarce assets with my monopoly money before everyone figures out this thing is going up in smoke? And what I'm going to do in the meantime is I'm going to print money to do that, make sure that my country eats so they can continue to eat while that dollar still has value, while we pivot to the new financial system.
You know what's scary, right? And this is the first country that realized it, is Canada today announced that they were going to dump some of our bonds, right? They were going to, well, not our bonds, their bonds that they were holding,
Huh.
you know, and that's kind of crazy because it kind of breaks down that scenario of what you're talking about because everybody's waiting for, the merry-go-round to stop. And Canada's like, well, we'll be first, right? And if they're the first people to dump bonds, right? And then let's say Saudi Arabia, China. If China does it, it's biblically bad, right? But they start devaluing the currency even further than it already is based on inflation, then it really is going to make it so much harder to purchase those finite assets.
But I mean, first, do you disagree with anything in my premise? Because I'm
No.
like, am I crazy? No?
No, no. I mean, honestly, what's funny is if you go deep into like the economist world, right? Like on all the social media, whether it be X threads, CNN versus Fox News, what's really interesting is you're seeing that like economists are all agreeing from both sides of the aisle. It's a bipartisan belief system that this crash is intentional. And what they're doing is they're going one layer deep. Like I said earlier, they're thinking about let's lower the rates, but they're not taking it, further for their consumers, their readers, and their audience to say what that actually means. So no, your premise is dead on. I don't think that retail actually understands what's happening yet.
So let's go another level, right? So if you knew that this was happening, and then you probably know that the other players at the table, which is all the other countries, aren't dumb, and they're going to be in a race to give up their bonds and their debt before it gets printed away into nothingness, right? Then this brings into the tariff strategy, right? So then what are tariffs going to do? Well, you've got a bunch of money, right? But this is how you keep the money in-house so that at least that dollar can still buy stuff in the country, and it's using that, and it's not going out to other countries. So it's like building a fence. And so it incentivizes, if you know it's all going down and you need time to pivot, then you've got to invest in your own infrastructure, and then you've got to get people employed and working and generating stuff. This idea where you're just taking from everyone else with imaginary dollars is going away. So tariffs.
Yeah, so I want you to expand upon that further because, like I said, you sent me an amazing podcast about China's currency. How it's, they basically essentially have two currencies, right? They have an internal and they have an external currency. You know what I'm talking about? You're the one that sent it
Yeah.
to me, so you want to explain what that means because that's kind of what you're implying right now.
Well, the US is learning from China's growth strategy, right? That's the premise of this podcast. And China has very advantageous trading mechanisms. And they basically have a currency that works inside of China, and they have a currency that works outside of China. And the whole leverage, right, is the idea is it's all designed to bring resources and money into China while keeping the other one that they can just print basically on the outside of China. And so the way that two economies work is fundamentally different. That's the nuts and bolts of it. And actually, I have to go deeper on it, but that was kind of what I picked up. And the idea, though, here would be the same, right? Which is basically trapping your wealth inside the company instead of siphoning out and reinvesting in infrastructure and things like that. Because no matter what happens, even if the dollar goes, right? Well, what's really going to happen though? Because the dollar is actually the strongest fiat currency, but do any of these other currencies have value?
I mean, that's what's crazy is, well, like using your China example is like, yes, China's currency has incredible value because it's protected, right? The United States currency is not protected because one, we're
Well,
overinflating
protected
it
by
by
what?
print.
Let's pause there. So what's it protected by?
It's protected by the government, right? Their
But
internal government.
but there's no reserve for it. There's no reserve
What does
asset.
Well, it doesn't matter. So let's be very clear about what like comparisons I'm making, right? So like you as a consumer, and we know this, right, is that your dollar, if you're holding it in a bank, is getting weaker and weaker every passing day because we're inflating the absolute you know, crap out of it. Right. I wanted to say something different, so I'm keeping it PG-13. But we're inflating it, right? So your dollar's not protected. Whereas in China, it's more so like a true stable coin, right? It's not inflating internally inside the country. So their dollars remain static. So they don't need wages to go up. That's what's crazy. Here in the United States, you have to outpace, upwards of 7% inflation, right, every year for your dollar to remain stasis, where its purchasing power isn't lost comparative to your salary. And other places, that's not the case because their currencies are protected.
But think about why that is. It's because they actually have internal infrastructure for that. They're reinvesting back in the country. And so they've created a feedback loop there. But what I'm simply saying is the advantage the US has is it has the strongest international currency. All of these countries' currencies are valueless. So fundamentally, you can't redeem them for anything. So my simple perspective is if you're doing game theory as the US on that, right? And you know that your advantage is that emotionally everyone has determined that your currency has the most value. and everyone's about to realize this whole fiat thing, the gig is up and they want to move to a digital currency. And you've got to play that game for your country, right? Wouldn't your move then be, well, even if my fiat currency is going down, my fiat currency is going to maintain the most value while it goes down. So I'm going to buy up the most stuff with it.
Hmm. No, yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, right? That's why I agree. The monopoly money purchasing, stocks or purchasing Bitcoin, it does make sense because once again, finite assets. So yeah, I agree with your premise.
And also, if you noticed in that podcast, it talked about a massive amount of gold entering the US from an undisclosed buyer.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's Fort Knox. I've been thinking about that, like not to put my conspiracy hat on, but like, hey man, how crazy is it that we have to question that in 2025? Not necessarily saying you have to believe it, but like you should ask questions. You should ask if that's there. I just watched James Bond Goldfinger so many times, I just assumed it was there, right? I've never actually asked the question, wait, is Fort Knox real or is it propaganda? And once again, not to put on my conspiracy hat because, really not. I'm assuming it's there, but like we have to ask that question. Do we have these finite resources in country? And you're seeing these inflows that you just talked about, and it is aggressive. And I don't think people realize how much gold we're actually buying.
Well, because the dollar still has value, right?
Hmm.
So maybe they took a couple months, they bought a bunch, and now here's my official prediction on what happens next. So pause this. We'll see if I'm crazy or not.
Okay.
I'm anticipating a fiat largely economic meltdown in the stock market that's going to go on. We might be in it. It might literally be starting. The nuclear meltdown is beginning, right?
Yeah.
And so what's going to happen, right, is I think gold, because I remember in 2008, gold was the one asset that like actually kind of went up. That's going to shoot up, I think, initially, right? And I think Bitcoin, because that's so tethered to the stock market, is going to crash down.
Hmm.
I think it's going to go crash hard. I think we might see 40s or sub 40 that it might hit until it bottoms out. And this is a short term thing over the next few weeks. And then what's going to happen if you paid attention to this, right? Oh, what a surprise! Right after the crypto summit, the fiat thing is going down. I think they met with everybody. They told them what was going to be happening, and they said, "Hey, here's how we plan for this." If you notice, we recommended a few cryptos beforehand, right? So we're going to architect a massive crash in crypto. We're going to get our bets in while the blood is in the streets, right? Because that's the recommended. If you want to buy something, buy it cheap. Buy the assets cheap when there's blood in the streets, and then we're going to the moon with those specific assets that we recommended. So my thing is, I think the stock market's going to crash. All these things are going to crash. Everyone's going to give up on crypto, leave it for dead, and then people are waiting on the sidelines to buy Bitcoin, Solana, Cardano, and Ethereum, and XRP. And those assets afterwards are going to go to the absolute moon when everyone's left it for dead. The weak hands will have given up their stacks, and we're going to transition into a digital economy within this year.
Yeah. So just so you know, when I'm cutting up clips to promote this, that's going to
Yeah.
be the clip, right? Like we're going to give people like absolute FOMO. But no, I don't disagree with a single thing you've said. Just to be clear. And look, I'm not trying to be like a sycophant. You know me. I like to be contrarian on a lot of
No,
things, and it gets me in trouble. So that's
challenge it.
fun.
I'm curious. I don't want to be right
There,
necessarily.
no, there's nothing. There's nothing to debate. What you just said is so absolutely correct, and the reason why it's correct is comes down to the fact that if you want to be a reductionist about it, is it's so weird to say this, but sanctions don't work anymore. Sanctioning what? Sanctioning how? There's so many different avenues to where you can trade in alternate currencies, whether it be BRICS currency or whether it be, crypto or any other form of, sanction avoidance, if you want to call it that. It's just absolutely crazy that we still exist in a world where we think that the US dollar can't be circumvented. And it aggressively is. And so everything you've just said is like when you know that to be true, when Swift is broken, where, global settlement takes, upwards of 48 hours just to send a wire transfer, and there's so many better technologies out there to where you can trade real world assets. You know, taking a little sidebar for a second, since we are talking about finite systems, real estate, tokenization of, real assets like minerals and mines and gold itself, being able to put those on the blockchain and trade those instantly outside of a brokerage firm. Like that's the world we're going into, where KYC AML, even though it is important, is not going to be the deciding factor whether or not you're an institutional investor or not to be able to hold and trade these assets in real time. So, a roundabout way of saying, yes, I agree with you.
So if this is all the case, right? I mean, and you don't disagree with this, this means that what this is the thing we've been talking about for the longest time, which is
Yes,
the official changeover from the fiat economy to the digital economy.
correct. Yeah, it's funny. It's like we've been talking and discussing, even outside the podcast, right? I don't even know what episode we're on, but we've been personally talking about this, I think, for like almost close to 5 years now. Because I know we started talking about this in 2020 whenever like the stocks crashed, and we're like, you and I were both like, no, bro, everything's about the moon. We were right then. But like we were off on our timing. We thought that was going to be the global kickoff, but now is the global kickoff. And I'm not saying that because, I have rose-colored glasses on or the fact that, I need this to be true. It's just a matter of just global liquidity and looking at math. Math is not mathing in the current system, and now we're transitioning into a a way vastly better technological system and a world that needs it.
So let's talk about that, right? Because for anyone who's left who didn't just throw up in their mouth after what we're basically talking about, I want to talk about two things, right? Which is A, what's going to happen in the short term and how can you prepare for the insanity? And B, why is it going to be better?
All right. Well, what can people do is not panic, be unemotional, right? Because look at 2008. History repeats itself, right? The people that didn't sell to 2008, and I know I'm being flippant about that. Some people had to sell to pay their bills, etc. I'm not being dismissive of people's personal circumstance, just to put that little pin in it. But my dad's off to the side. He's like, I didn't sell. But those people, yeah, he goes, huh, I have to quote him. He goes, I didn't sell, and now I'm retired. All right. So my dad, who's
Boom,
sitting off to the
living
side, yeah,
proof right there.
living proof. So
You're
he's
right
off
there demonstrating diamond hands.
diamond hands. Well, I mean, that's literally where we're at, right? And you said this earlier. I'm not saying something that you haven't already said in this podcast, which is, you know, uh, people need to purchase, hard assets. They need to hold them, and that's basically what has to happen. You have to purchase hard assets, gold. And I'm not even being a boomer by saying that. I genuinely believe gold and silver are great plays, and I think they're going to perform very well. People that are technologists listening to this podcast might be like, "What are you talking about? Bitcoin all the way," which I'm going to get to. Yes, that's great because it's easily transferable, right? You can send it at the speed of light. Great. But hard assets, stocks, crypto assets that are proven, not meme coins, get those out of here. Those are trying to steal your money, which Sam and I both know about, by the way, which is fun. Another topic for another time. And yeah, man, land hard assets, just buying hard assets. That's how you can prepare and
Here's a
dollar
really
cost
interesting
average.
thing. I'm
Yeah.
just going to pose this, whether you see if you have the answer, because I don't. So let's imagine that the fiat world disintegrates. What
Mhm.
happens to your mortgage?
Oh, well, this is what's terrible. All right. This is going to be a rules for thee, but not for me situation where a lot of people are just going to get screwed over. And so this is what I've been like. I'm going to dance and toe the line on politics for a second, even though I told everyone this would be like a non-politics, conversation. But I do need to toe the line on something because it really is interesting. Right now, there's a great disparity between Democrats and Republicans on one issue that I'm like, okay, this is interesting, and it's about like the haves and have-nots being able to succeed in this new incoming economy, right? And I'm not being dismissive of people's personal choices, but historically, the right has been more capitalist like minded, right? The growth of capital, hoarding of capital, and we're both capitalists is not necessarily a bad thing. And where the left has been more about social services condensing into government and government like giving those services to people, right? And the reason why I'm saying I'm towing the line on this is that the capitalists that have been preparing for this moment arguably will do better, right? And that gap between the left and right will increase. And this is where things become really interesting. And it becomes interesting because you're going to have a new elite class, right? And some people might argue is like, no, Jace, the class has always existed. But I think there's going to be a major wealth transference that people are not prepared for from one generation to the next.
As you were just describing that, I mean, what I think is actually going to happen, right, is very quietly you're going to have a large percentage of the population functionally turn into a slave. And
Correct.
what that means, what is modern slavery, is you don't work or you have some kind of thing that you do and you get your guaranteed universal basic income that can buy a fixed amount of things from the company store, and you have no hope of upward mobility. This is serfdom. This is oligarchy. And if you were smart enough to grab some assets prior to that, then you get to do whatever you want.
You know what's crazy because I do agree with what you're saying, but it's like in our current situation, I know several friends who I consider to be very intelligent, but they don't have the means to purchase these assets, right? They just life circumstances, whether it be children or sickness or anything, they literally do not have the ability. It's not that they aren't aware; they're all financially literate people, and it's actually at a point where debt is so crazy, whether it be student loans or whether it be credit card debt or your car payment, your mortgage, as you just indicated, people are going to be trapped in their traditional decision making and they aren't going to be able to accumulate. And this is what I was talking about with left versus right and that divide that's going to grow is it's almost a situation of circumstance that no one has control over. It's either you started planning a decade ago, which you and I both did, and I guess good for us, but at the same time, people that want to make these transitions and are seeing what we're seeing, they don't have the ability to pivot fast enough.
It's going to get really weird when everybody who listened to their financial planner and went and did their 401k, counted on their social security, they did everything right, finds out what actually was going on.
Yeah. The liabilities program in the United States, and I'm not saying I'm for or against it, I'm just making an observation, is in deep trouble, right? It's in deep, deep, deep trouble. Like, this is the first time in my adult life where I've actually like looked at it. I'm like, man, that might experience some like crazy changes. I'm not saying for good or for worse, but like there's the liabilities are on the table at the moment, and it's really indicative of what you just said. People did everything right. They had plans based on promises that were made to them, and I don't know if those promises are still in play.
I mean, how did the Madoff people do?
They did
Because this is
great.
Madoff. This is Madoff on such a massive scale.
Hmm.
The confidence scam of the American dollar Ponzi scheme,
Hmm.
and the debt cycle and the debt leverage that everybody is now in. I mean, like we're entering like Fight Club territory, right? Where the end result is you just got to blow up the credit building.
Yeah, the only thing that can like change it, right? There's only one in my opinion, and once again, I'm incredibly biased. Sam, let's recognize you're incredibly biased as well. You already know where I'm going with this, is if we repeg the dollar. That's the only way out if we want to keep the dollar and give people the illusion that their dollars still matter. If we peg the dollar to something like gold, Bitcoin, XRP, or maybe it's a basket of currencies, and the basket of currencies that you indicated earlier, right? Uh, that's the only way we can get out of this because then you at least you have a financial backstop that is real.
Well, supposedly the U.S. has 200,000 Bitcoin, right? That's currently worth a lot of billions of dollars, right? So,
Mhm.
but if you think about that, there's only 21 million Bitcoin that's ever going to be there, not even counting the ones that have been lost. So who even knows how many have been lost or unrecoverable?
I think there's 17 million just like above that are available.
So if we think about that, 200,000 is what the U.S. government currently has. There's how many countries in the world?
Dude, man, I don't know. I want to say like what? Like probably like 157. It's 154 or 157.
Okay. So the U.S. is quite a head start over those other countries.
Mhm.
and the global Bitcoin race and battle, and they haven't even started to use the US dollar to accumulate. MicroStrategy has been leveraging quite a bit to grab as much as it can. So if you were to suddenly standardize on Bitcoin and gold as the official reserve currencies to build an empire around and peg your dollar to it, um, I mean, if you had to repeg to something.
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense. And what's funny is you left out the states. I know you saw this. Like Texas is buying
Mhm.
Bitcoin now, Utah is buying Bitcoin now, and they're being aggressive with their purchasing strategy. And I'm not sure if you saw this
But
because this was
if
announced today. Go ahead.
just sorry, the one other thing I'll say before we get to that, there's probably $100 trillion or so or more of US dollars currently in circulation. So if you have crypto right now and the world shifts to a digital economy,
Mhm.
what's your bag worth?
I mean, this is what's crazy, right? If we're right, and once again, bias is going to shine through right here. I think we're right. I mean, having one Bitcoin could equate to something like $10 million. That's
I mean,
crazy. If I saw a stat today, this will make you laugh. I saw that if XRP captured 5% of Swift transactions, only 5%. All right, that's crazy. 5%, kind of like reasonable, and it doesn't have to be XRP. It could be any other crypto, right? It would send XRP, which is a very like robust currency, to over $100 a coin. Right? I think there's 100 billion XRP in circulation. Like that should
so if
put things
they
in perspective for
made
people.
if they made the XRP the official, and they've been planning this stuff for quite some time, right? But if they made XRP the official um, coin of Swift and everything that was just powered by XRP, would that even be? Is that viable? I mean, because it sounds like that's where they would probably go with it.
Yeah, it might happen. Um, sorry, my dad is
Yeah.
talking to my mom. They're completely unaware that I'm recording a podcast right now, so they're having a little conversation. No, look, everything's viable, right? It's just it's dependent on whether or not these the governments, right? These NGOs, whatever you want to call them, they want to make these entities that powerful, right? Do you want to make a independent company, Ripple, that powerful? Probably not.
But if we're talking about where we started this podcast, which is the onset of fascism, and the US government is holding all of those assets as strategic reserves and core technologies developed within the country, and you wanted to control the financial system, then it's not really giving a company control of anything. You're controlling the company.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. One second. I don't know. My whole entire family decided to
Yeah.
come to the pier,
uh,
right? And I was like, I'm gonna get away from everybody and like to do this at I don't know. They're still trying to talk to me. It's crazy. But yeah, man. No, if our premise is correct, then yes, everything you just said makes sense. I've said that a
so let's
lot. Like
pause
Sam,
right there,
you've been
though,
right a lot
because I
this
got.
episode.
We'll take it one step further, right? Because if you look at their official crypto recommendations that Trump dropped before all of this went down, and I'm mostly trying to tell this to people as a public service announcement, right? He laid out the blueprint, and if you think about what a future economy looks like, Bitcoin is digital gold in the new US economy. Solana is running every single smart contract, period, and everything is tokenized and it's all on Solana and everybody is using it. And like you write down to like every movie is a Solana meme coin, right? That's managing. Like, why not just do that? And then Ethereum mixed with Ethereum. I mean, why not? Right?
That is a good idea. Every single movie is a meme coin. That's what I took away from your very brilliant analysis. Um, I'm going to recommend though, like we take this podcast and cut it down into like 35 minutes or so, because that's where we're roughly at. Because
Yeah.
literally, my entire family just showed up on the pier. My dad is fishing off the side right here. My nephews are behind me,
Dude,
and
go have fun, man. It's all good. Go enjoy some family time. It's good to see you, brother. And I don't
This
know,
was
man.
solid, by the way. Maybe we do 30-minute episodes because
Fine by
this
me.
was like, this was tight. This was tight. So you want to give us the outro, Sam? I mean, like, I feel like we gave people enough to
I
chew
feel
on.
like this is fitting, right? So we just uh, laid out what's coming. We laid out all the stuff and what we think might be coming. We seem to be in agreement there. And so what is my recommendation is buy the assets that Trump recommended, but wait until the collapse happens. Grab the stuff at the end. And in the meantime, do what Jace is about to do right now, which is go hang out with your family and have a good time.
Couldn't agree more. Don't panic. Hold. Be safe. Be smart. And don't panic. I'm just gonna say
Elevate.
don't panic twice.
Hitchhiker's Guide to
Elevate.
the Galaxy, man. Elevate and bring a towel. See you later, brother.
All right, man. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate podcast. Peace.